The Adventures of Bob and the World's Worst Alarm Clock. Chapter 1. The morning that shouldn't have happened. Bob never liked mornings. In fact, if mornings were a person, Bob would have already unfriended them on social media, blocked their number, and left a 1-star Yelp review. But unfortunately, mornings existed, and Bob had to deal with them. On one particular Tuesday, Bob's alarm clock decided it was tired of being an alarm clock. Instead of its usual beep 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 sound, it played what could only be described as a karaoke version of a goat screaming the lyrics to Bohemian Rhapsody. Bob woke up in terror. "What is happening?" he screamed, falling out of bed and landing face first into a pile of dirty socks. The clock, somehow smug, continued singing, "Is this the real life?" Nee hee hee. Bob tried hitting the snooze button. He missed and slapped himself instead. He tried unplugging it, but the clock laughed and said, "You can't stop rock and roll, buddy." Bob considered moving to another country or another planet. Finally, he grabbed the clock, ran to the bathroom, and threw it into the bathtub. Unfortunately, his neighbor, Mrs. Pumpernickel, was already in the bathtub. She was fully dressed, knitting a sweater, and sipping tea. "Good morning, Robert," she said politely, without stopping her knitting. "Do you mind? That's my relaxation tub." Bob froze. "Why, are you in my bathtub?" "Oh, I don't have one of my own," Mrs. Pumpernickel replied cheerfully. "I just borrow yours when you're asleep. Don't worry, I always leave a tea bag for you on the counter." Sure enough, Bob looked over and saw a soggy tea bag waiting for him. Bob wanted to argue, but the alarm clock screamed, "Mama, just kill the man." And Mrs. Pumpernickel joined in with surprisingly powerful opera vocals. Bob sighed. He decided this was not the weirdest Tuesday he'd had. Not even top 3.
The Adventures of Bob and the World's Worst Alarm Clock. Chapter 2. The breakfast that broke the laws of physics. Bob decided he needed breakfast. Breakfast solved everything, at least temporarily. Toast, eggs, coffee, simple, normal, not full of screaming goats. He stumbled into the kitchen and discovered 3 things immediately. His fridge was humming the Star Wars theme. His toaster had grown legs. There was a raccoon sitting at the table, wearing Bob's favorite bathrobe. "Morning," the raccoon said, sipping orange juice straight from the carton. Bob blinked. "Am I still dreaming?" The raccoon shrugged. "If this were a dream, would I be drinking your juice?" "That doesn't." Bob stopped himself. Logic never worked in his apartment. Last week, his microwave applied for college anyway, the raccoon continued, wiping his whiskers with Bob's road sleeve. "You're out of cereal." "I checked twice." The toaster suddenly jumped onto the counter, shouted, "I am free," and launched his slices of bread into the ceiling, where they stuck like bizarre decorations. Bob groaned. "Can't I have one normal breakfast?" The fridge, still humming, opened its door and said, "No." Bob considered calling someone for help. Maybe an exorcist, or a plumber. Or a plumber exorcist. But before he could pick up the phone, Mrs. Pumpernickel wandered in from the bathroom, still knitting, still sipping tea. "Oh, lovely breakfast," she said. "I'll just make myself a little omelet." She cracked an egg on the stove. Instead of yolk, a small origami crane popped out and flew around the room, chirping angrily. Bob sat down at the table, defeated. "Fine, I'll just drink coffee." He poured himself a cup. The coffee climbed out of the mug, grew arms and legs, and shook his hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Greg," the coffee said. Bob nodded politely. "Of course you are." Mrs. Pumpernickel clapped her hands. "Oh, I love when breakfast introduces itself." The raccoon burped. The toaster fainted. And Bob realized he hadn't even left the apartment yet. This day was going to get worse. Much, much worse.
The Adventures of Bob and the World's Worst Alarm Clock. Chapter 3. The journey to work that should have been illegal. Bob eventually remembered he had a job. This was unfortunate, because jobs usually required leaving the house. And leaving the house today seemed riskier than wrestling a porcupine inside a balloon factory. Still, Bob grabbed his bag, avoided eye contact with Greg the coffee, who was now doing push-ups on the table, and opened the front door. Immediately, he regretted it. The hallway outside his apartment was filled with ducks, hundreds of them. all wearing tiny neckties. "Excuse me," Bob muttered, trying to squeeze past. One duck quacked, looked offended, and slapped Bob with its wing. Another duck handed him a business card that read, "Duck and Duck Legal Services, we sue for bread." Bob shoved the card in his pocket. He was late enough already. He made it to the street, only to realize his car had apparently joined a yoga class. It was bent into what looked like the downward dog position. A passing jogger clapped. "Beautiful form." "Great," Bob sighed. "How do I even drive this?" The car answered by honking in a meditative tone and saying, "Namaste, fine, no car." He decided to take the bus. The bus arrived 5 minutes later. It was painted bright pink and blasting disco music. The driver, a man wearing sunglasses shaped like pineapples, gave Bob a thumbs up. "Hop in, brother. Welcome to the Funky Express." Inside, the passengers were doing the cha-cha while juggling pineapples. A goat in a business suit was giving a PowerPoint presentation on how to succeed in marketing without opposable thumbs. Bob sat down, clutching his bag. He whispered to himself, "This is normal. This is fine. People ride disco buses all the time." The goat stopped mid-presentation, pointed at Bob, and shouted, "That man didn't clap during slide 3. Everyone gasped. The bus went silent. Even the disco ball hanging from the ceiling stopped spinning. Bob raised his hands nervously. I didn't know there was a clapping requirement." The goat narrowed its eyes. "Ignorance is no excuse." Bob thought he was doomed. But suddenly Greg the coffee burst through the bus window, flexing his tiny caffeinated arms. "Don't worry, Bob. I got you." The passengers cheered. The disco started again, and the bus continued its chaotic ride toward downtown. Bob buried his face in his hands. "I should have just stayed in bed."